Hello, Packers fans, wherever you may be. It's time for another edition of the Pack Attack Cast for September 15th, 2025. I hope you enjoyed an NFL weekend where there was no Packers action. It was actually nice for me to relax and enjoy the weekend and enjoy the glow of the 2-0 Green Bay Packers. Had some family in town, so it actually made things a little easier, more manageable, that I didn't have to watch every single game, especially the Packers game, since they had a dominant win on Thursday. So I hope you enjoyed the weekend the same way. It's always fun to just turn on the games on a Sunday and not really have a rooting interest per se. I was rooting against the Lions. That didn't last for too long. Was rooting against the Vikings. That was fun. And now we're going to take a look at the NFC North as we start to get ready for Packers versus Browns. Not a lot of Green Bay Packers news because the Packers played on Thursday. So I want to take a look at the NFC North. By the way, who happens to be first in the NFC North right now? The Green Bay Packers. Could you imagine a scenario at the end of the season where the Packers have controlled the NFC North through the entire season? From week 1 to week 18, the Packers can be the North champ. How amazing that would be. And things are really lining up very nicely for the Green Bay Packers to have a huge run at the start of the season. And if we could build up wins one on top of the other while the rest of the NFC North struggles to find their way, we could be in a position where by the time the division games come into play, they're much less impactful if we have a sizable lead in the division. The Packers don't play a divisional game again until they play against the Vikings. I'll be there at Lambeau Field for Packers versus Vikings for the next divisional game. I'll also be there to play when we play the 2-0 Cardinals, which is going to be very interesting. I think the Cardinals are a fun little story right now. They haven't really played anybody that's what I would consider a playoff level team by any stretch. So it'll be interesting to see where the Cardinals are when I go to that game, Packers versus Cardinals in Phoenix. Really, actually, technically Glendale, Arizona. But you know what I'm talking about. So what we're going to do is take some time today by looking at the NFC North, and some news and notes tied to the best division in the NFL. Again, led by your Green Bay Packers. And it just so happens the Packers are in a great position to continue their dominance in the NFC North and possibly the NFC. So let's take a look at the standings right now. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the NFL standings. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Packers here, the NFC North. Your Green Bay Packers are 2-0 with a positive net points of 13. Your Minnesota Vikings are in second place at 1-1 with net points of negative 13. Detroit Lions are 1-1 with a positive net points of 17. And your Chicago Bears are 0-2 with a net point of minus 34. So shout out to you Chicago Bears fans. By the way, the Bears still suck. I'm going to keep saying it until you prove me wrong. Everybody, all the Bears fans were crowing about the offseason. They were crowing about the fact that they finally won a game in Lambeau Stadium. And now, here we go, 0-2, and they do not look very good, my friends. I don't know if the Chicago Bears can win 6 games in this season. They are not looking very well at all. Now, they did face the Detroit Lions, who are coming off of a bad victory, a bad loss, so they really wanted to take it to the Bears to quiet down their fan base. But still, let's talk about this division and some news and notes. But first, before we do that, I want to take a look at the conference standings here. Let's look at our conference standings. For the National Football Conference, at first place, per NFL.com, your Green Bay Packers, 2-0. Second, Philadelphia Eagles, 2-0. San Francisco 49ers, I don't understand how the 49ers are getting these wins given their injury issues right now, but they are 2-0. Then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play tonight. Arizona Cardinals are 2-0. Los Angeles Rams are 2-0. So right now, Green Bay Packers are first in the NFC North. They are actually technically first in the NFC, according to NFL.com. That's very early, but let's get excited. Let's take a moment to realize that despite some serious injuries week 2, the Packers raised the bar. They fought through and beat a very good game, a very good team in the Commanders, but right after they beat the Detroit Lions. So the Packers are really in a good position right now. So I just wanted to go over that really quickly for you guys. We are looking really good for the start of the season. And look at what the Green Bay Packers have ahead of them, okay? We have a game against the Cleveland Browns. Then we have a game against Jerry Jones, the Micah Parsons revenge game. Do you think there's any chance that the Packers are not going to win against the Dallas Cowboys? Micah Parsons might get 4 or 5 sacks against his buddy Dak Prescott that night. Very excited about it. Then we've got a bye week. Then the Cincinnati Bengals come to town. They're probably going to be without their starting quarterback in that game. Then we go and play the Cardinals. So things are really looking up for the Green Bay Packers to build wins after wins, while the rest of the NFC North in particular is looking like they're going to struggle. So let's take a look at news and notes for your Green Bay Packers. We haven't seen a lot of news and notes the last couple days, which is probably part of the reason that I didn't stream. Plus, I had some family coming in. But biggest news for the Green Bay Packers, Jaden Reed is expected to have surgery this week. My guess would be he's already had the surgery and he's recovering. The Packers just haven't announced it yet. But Jaden Reed is going to be out with a broken collarbone and be back in 6 to 8 weeks, maybe in time for the Eagles game. So let's look at the silver lining here. Obviously, Jaden Reed being out with a broken collarbone is a negative. But if there is a positive to that injury, is he was dealing with a foot injury. So while he heals his collarbone, he can also heal his foot. And hopefully by the time he comes back in 6 to 8 weeks, Jaden Reed will be back to 100% for this offense. In addition, I think this gives the Packers an opportunity to go full into the Matthew Golden experiment. I mean, Matthew Golden is a natural fit. He's actually the best fit on the roster right now to be the slot receiver. So on 3 wide receiver sets, I expect to see Matthew Golden in the slot and Wicks and Romeo Doubs on the outside. So that's what I expect to happen. I think Matthew Golden is going to have a big game against the Browns. I know I've said it the last 2 weeks, and it hasn't happened yet, but he was so close to having 100 yards and a touchdown last week. They were just inches away from making big plays to Matthew Golden. That will happen this coming week. I think it's reasonable to expect Matthew Golden to have 60 yards and possibly a touchdown this week against the Cleveland Browns. So the positive of Jaden Reed being out, number one, he can heal his collarbone and his leg, and I think it gives Matthew Golden more opportunities to have targeted passes thrown his way. The Packers start as 8.5 favorites against the Browns on Sunday. I hope the Packers focus on this game and make sure this doesn't become a trap game. If you're not familiar with gambling, a trap game is where a really good team overlooks a bad team because they're looking at the next week's game. Happens all the time in the NFL, and the Packers need to avoid a trap game against the Browns. The Browns actually have a pretty solid defense. So I think we've got strength versus strength, Packers defense versus Browns defense, but the Packers offense should be able to overcome and become a very effective winner in that game. 8.5 favorites on the road really means they're about 11.5 point favorites in a neutral field. So it's really interesting to see if the Green Bay Packers can win this game by 2 touchdowns. They need to show their dominance over bad teams. They've beaten 2 really good teams. One score was a little closer than it really looked. But hey, the score is the score. They won by 9 points. Probably should have been 14 or 15. Okay? The Cleveland Browns have got to be punished. The Packers need to establish the run. They need to get out, score early and often, and make this a 2-touchdown win over the Cleveland Browns to show their ability to overcome injuries, overcome adversity, and beat the teams they're supposed to beat by a big margin. We know over the last couple of years, the Packers have done a very good job of beating the teams they're supposed to beat. But we don't want them to read their press clippings. We want them to focus on beating the Browns on Sunday by 2 touchdowns. That would make me very happy. More importantly, if they build up a big lead, they can take some of their starters out of the game and get some rest for the big game against the Cowboys the next week. We're closely watching other injuries besides Jaden Reed, especially on the offensive line. Zach Tom and Aaron Banks need to practice, in my opinion, by Thursday if they're going to start this week. So I'd love to see Zach Tom and Aaron Banks get back into this game. The Packers are going to be facing Myles Garrett, so it's important for them to have the best offensive line they can have going into Cleveland. So fingers crossed there. Hopefully the Packers are going to have a nice run on Sunday against the Cleveland Browns and handle their business. Let's take a look at the Detroit Lions real quickly. They beat the Bears 51-21 in Detroit. It's a good sign. It's a good sign, but the Bears are in full rebuild mode. I want to see how far the Ravens and Lions beat heads against each other on Sunday. The Lions did what they had to do. They had to beat a good team by a big number. I'd love to see the Packers do that against the Browns this coming week. But I want to see the Lions show they can beat a good team. They have not done that yet. In fact, the Lions are currently 5.5 point underdogs against the Ravens at Baltimore. If Detroit can make it a competitive game against the Ravens on the road, then I'll start to feel that Detroit might be back. But they need to show their ability to be effective on the road against a really good team. If they can do that, then I'll be more concerned about the Lions. All I know is Detroit got their butts kicked by the Packers, and then they beat the Bears, which isn't really much of a feat right now. So let's see what happens. The Detroit Lions did have some nicked up players in the game. There might be some lingering injury issues against the Ravens, so I'll have to see what happens there. The Lions are very thin, especially on their defensive end room. Their defensive end room basically has three guys. And if one of those guys was hurt in the game against the Bears, they think he'll be fine. But this is something to watch for the Lions, because if they have a couple more injuries on defense, they don't have the same depth that they had last year on this team this year. So we'll have to see what happens there. Let's look at the Minnesota Vikings. They lost a bad game against the Falcons, 22-6, in a game that was not even that close. This game was a beatdown by the Atlanta Falcons. Hats off the Atlanta Falcons for a really dominant performance on all three phases of the game. It was a pretty embarrassing loss for the Minnesota Vikings. They got beat on offense. They got beat on defense. They got beat on special teams. The Vikings are clearly in a situation where their ability to grow is going to really depend on J.J. McCarthy. J. McCarthy had 2 interceptions in this game. He did not look well, and as a result, the Minnesota Vikings did not look well. Also, really curious about how J.J. McCarthy's play is going to start to impact chemistry. I'm starting to see things on the field and off the field where Viking stars are frustrated with J.J. McCarthy and how things are going in the passing offense. If the Vikings continue to struggle on offense, there could be some major chemistry issues. The Vikings lost J.J. McCarthy to an ankle injury, and he'll be out for at least a week. Also, Aaron Jones is out for at least a week due to a hamstring injury. They will play the Bengals this week in a battle of backup quarterbacks. That sounds interesting. So, that is going to be an interesting game here. So, the Bengals aren't going to have their starting quarterback. The Vikings are not going to have their starting quarterback. I think, in my mind, that the Vikings have the better team outside of quarterbacks between the Bengals and the Vikings. So it's time for the Vikings' depth and quality on both sides of the ball to kind of rise up to the occasion and show that they can be a competitive team. If the Vikings lose to the Bengals without Joe Burrow, that is going to be a very bad sign for your Vikings this year. We're going to have to watch that very closely. And let's talk about the Bears. Bears lost to the to the Lions, 51-21, and clearly are in rebuild mode. I still don't think if they're going to win 6 games this year. Sorry, Bears, you still suck. The Bears still suck until proven otherwise. So that's it for today. We don't have a lot of Packers news. So what I'm going to start to do starting tomorrow is we're going to start to ramp up for Packers versus Browns. I'm actually waiting for PFF to update their grades. That wasn't done as of this morning, which kind of surprises me because the Packers played on Thursday night. You think they would have graded out the Packers, but a lot of the grades are incomplete and a lot of the PFF stats have not been updated yet. So we're going to take a look at those tomorrow, assuming that they're updated. We're going to start talking about updates on player injuries, keys to winning against the Browns. We're going to start to dive deep into this Browns team because this Browns team is not toothless. It does have a very strong defense, and they do have some good individual players on offense. So the Packers need to be ready for this game, and they need to go into Cleveland and make that stadium theirs. Now, there's no doubt that Packers fans travel better than any other team in the NFL. And I looked last week, and you can get tickets for Packers versus Browns, really good seats, for less than $200 right now. So I have a feeling there's going to be a huge number of Packer fans at that game on Sunday. I was actually tempted to go. Unfortunately, it's not in the cards for me. I've got some things to do at home, so I'll be watching the game at home, which is good because then I could do a pregame show and I could do a postgame show for you on Sunday. But I was very tempted because there's only $200 to get really good seats in Cleveland. Of course, because it's Cleveland. Okay? So we'll be back tomorrow with more Packer-centric news, but I wanted to take a look at the NFC North and the fact that the Green Bay Packers have got the NFC North by the throat right now. The Lions are a game behind them in the standings. They can't change that until they beat the Packers. The Vikings are kind of in free fall right now due to injuries and poor play by J.J. McCarthy. And the Bears are the Bears. So if the Packers can stack a bunch of wins right now, they will be in a position where they can take this division by the throat. So let's go out there, Packers, and make sure this division stays green and gold. We'll talk to you tomorrow with another edition of the Pack Attack Cast.